Hey everybody, this is Steve. A little video update about where we're at in the class and everything. I just finished posting grades, tentative grades we'll talk about in a second, for the ancient style YouTube commercial analysis. And to get to those, what you need to do is you need to log into EMU Online and the class, and you should be able to navigate through the grade book and find my very, very brief comments and my very, very sketchy grade for where you're at in the project so far. Like I said, everyone's going to revise this, and so I just read through these very quickly and gave some initial impressions and initial grades so that you have something to work with as you revise the project. Now, because I'm so late in getting these things done, it's just been one thing after another. I don't think the Super Bowl helped much either, because that was actually kind of interesting to watch this year. Because it's just been one thing after another, I've rearranged the due date for the revised version of this project. So if you look at the schedule, which I just updated a little while ago on the website, the revised due date for part 1 of the style revision project is now February 17th. So what that means is that by February 17th, you need to have a revised version of the ancient style YouTube project that I just graded, and we'll talk about in a second. And you also need to have a brief analysis of how you apply the style guides to revise your project. Oh, and by brief I mean, as I said in the assignment, between 750 and 1,000 words. So be sure to take a look at that. The other thing in terms of the schedule I just want to point out is that I've added links to the next 2 blog projects for this unit, the Comparing Strunk and White with Williams, and also the What Are Other People Saying, which asks you to go read other people's blogs. By the way, the other thing that I don't include in any of these blog assignments, but if you want to add into a blog assignment, beyond some sort of conversation in the class, the stuff that we're reading that sort of builds on these style guides, the stuff about Strunk and White, especially the illustrated version, the weird Marquis de Sade version of Strunk and White, the style for Twitter, stuff like that. If you want to write about that in your blogs, that's great too. But those assignments are posted now too. Just a couple of general things about that are beyond the style guide sort of advice that apply to, I think, the analysis that a lot of people gave with the ancient styles and YouTube thing. The first thing to keep in mind is, and this is hard for classes like this, is an audience beyond the class. And what I mean by this is that imagine someone on the web out there, it's my symbol for World Wide Web, out there on the web, stumbles across your essay for some reason, and they read it. Will that essay make sense to them? And will its purpose and reason for being there make some sense to them? And again, that can be hard to sort of manage because it's kind of an artificial exercise in the sense that you wouldn't be writing this essay if you weren't taking this class and writing it to the teacher in some sense. But I'm trying to get you to write beyond the teacher, because that's what good writing is. Good writing reaches beyond a single reader like that. So for example, if you have an introduction that says something like, I thought the assignment was really interesting, Crowley and Haw, he had a lot of interesting stuff to say, and I picked my commercial because of the advice that you gave me. Well, that's really more like the answer to a test question. Like I asked, like the essay assignment was, a question that you'd have for an essay test, as opposed to an essay that goes out to the world for other people to read. So you have to really assume less. You have to assume that your audience doesn't know as much about the material as you do. And as a result of that, you need to sort of explain things a little bit more, both in terms of how you're quoting and paraphrasing and referencing the readings from Crowley and Haughey and other resources, how you explain the ads, how you explain your sort of analysis. Okay, so in other words, don't just assume me and don't just assume other people in the class. Assume a group beyond that. The second thing in general sort of terms that I would suggest is that it's really important to introduce and explain your sources, especially on first reference. This is maybe kind of a pet peeve of mine, I'm not sure, but instead of saying, da-da-da-da-da-da, parentheses, Crowley, Haughey, and then a page number, the first time you introduce them, give it a kind of overview of what it is that you're talking about, right? So in other words, explain that this is a chapter from this textbook and it talks about style or something like that. Again, just to sort of orientate the reader to figure out where they're at in this project. Something that is kind of talked a little bit about in both Strunk and White and Williams, particularly in Williams, is the different role of introductions and conclusions as paragraphs, how to structure them. Now, I'm not going to talk about what they would talk about, but I'll just give you two general pieces of advice. One is that almost everyone can take another look at their introduction and their conclusion in order to make their essay better than it was. These are almost always good places to begin thinking in terms of revision. The second thing is that you should always write the introduction or rewrite the introduction after you write the entire project, if that makes sense. Because you got to remember that when I read something or when anybody reads something, we typically start at the beginning and go to the end. And so, the introduction is supposed to signal to us what to look for. But the thing is that as a writer, if you just write stuff and you start with the introduction and you just keep on going until you get to the end, then you haven't built in your introduction things for people to look for. Does that make sense? In other words, you have a particular power potentially as a writer to give readers a signal for what to observe in your introduction if you point out some of these things earlier on. But the only way that you can do it is if you actually revise it based on what you wrote. So hopefully that'll make sense. Last but not least is remember that the goal of the project here is to make some sort of analysis and some sort of claim about the way that ancient style is working in these ads. One of the things that I warned against in the assignment was make sure that you don't do just sort of like, and then there's this stylistic element, and then there's this trope, and then there's this figure, and stuff like that. So, because a lot of the projects are basically a sort of list of all the different things that are in these ads. And that's a good place to start in terms of a draft, because now you can go back and look at all those different things, and you can go to the next level, which is you can do in this revision, which is what's the point of that? In other words, what's the effect of how do all these different figures and tropes and stuff like that we talked about enhance the effectiveness of the ad? Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Okay. I think that's it for now. I'm sort of like looking at the window here and thinking that there may be a snow day Wednesday, February 9th, I guess, or 10th it would be. But hey, it's an online class, so I'll still see you online.